Well, I'm Marc Herndon. I'm a contract interior designer at R&L, which is a commercial architecture firm, primarily in Denver, Colorado. I went to school at James Madison University for my undergraduate degree.
Was it an interior design degree?
It was an interior design. It was a fighter accredited program at the time, which is now CETA. But I didn't start in interior design. I actually started in health administration, and that lasted about 2 years. I had a 1.7 GPA. My parents threatened to pull me out of school and stick me in community college, so I had to, figure life out pretty quickly. And I had the fortunate opportunity of talking with an architect who taught interior design at James Madison, and he convinced me to take a 101 class. And I took a, introduction to interior design. Absolutely loved it. It was nothing like I thought it was going to be. I did have a finesse for decorating and doing all those things, but I think my real passion is actually in organization and solving problems. And it turned out to be, the perfect thing for me.
How is it different than what you thought it would be?
I thought it was going to be a lot more based on materials and the creation of almost like a stage environment, like what clients want, teaching you how to provide clients what they ask for versus telling clients what they need. That was a big turning point for me, because I think I would have gotten it was interesting from the beginning, I think, in that I did want to learn more about decoration and materials, but then to find a real science behind the decision making and, the ability to use design to improve business. I think that's what's kept me in the industry, for 15 years now. So. And it keeps changing, it doesn't get any better than, a career that never gets stale, and interior design never gets stale. I always tell, people that ask me, what I do, I always say interior design is like the future of the built environment, when sustainability is totally pushing us to reuse what's here already. And that's what interior design does. It's less about creating from the ground up, and it's more about using what's already here wisely. So
when you got out of school, then where did you go from there for your first job?
My first job, I actually graduated from James Madison with a dual degree in art history and interior design.
Oh,
and so I used my art history degree and went to Charleston, South Carolina for a year and worked for the Historic Charleston Foundation as a docent/assistant curator, which was very challenging but very boring. And I eventually got put into lighting design and exhibit design more than research. And so I quickly figured out that's really where my passion was, and in a year's time I put in an application at OPX in Washington, D.C., which is it's a smaller firm. It's about 50 designers, and I was there for about 7 years before moving to Denver.
And so you worked with OPX before you came to R&L?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so why did you pick R&L?
Our industry's pretty small, and the vendors that I worked with in DC actually talked to the vendors that worked in Denver, and the carpet people and all of those guys, and they pretty much sent me a short list of all the firms that I should be interested in, and R&L was one of the top 3. And so I put my application in, went to an interview, and it was good chemistry.
Yeah.
So
That's
it worked
great.
out.
And you've been there for?
I've been there for 8 years now. So 2005.
So let's talk about your client. Do you want to explain how the project came to R&L, how you became the lead designer on the project?
Sure. Wheeler Trigg O'Donnell was represented by a developer, Jones Lang LaSalle, locally. Typical for this process, what occurs is an interview of architects and designers, and we were one of, I believe, 4 firms in town that they interviewed before they made a selection for architectural services. The interview went extremely well. It was very intimidating, but it went, pretty well. And I think it was less than 48 hours, we got a phone call and said, we'd like for you to do our next space. So it was a good thing for me, because typically at R&L we've got so many people that you may not be the person that interviews for the job, but you'll be the person that works on the job. And so this job in particular was one that I presented at the interview, as the project designer, and we were able to win it.
Wow.
So it's good to see everything from beginning to end without having coming in as support staff or anything like that.
And can you talk a little bit about who the client is? I know they law offices.
Wheeler Trigg O'Donnell is one of the nation's largest trial attorney firms. They represent lots of aspects of the automobile industry, tire companies. They represent medical companies, insurance companies, you name it. If there's any type of corporate law practice, they represent them in some respect. So I hate to say that they're the bad guys, but typically if your tires blow out on your car, they're not representing you, they're representing Bridgestone or Firestone. They're those guys.
Okay. And what was the scope of the project?
Scope of the project, they were in a space in another high-rise in Denver, and they were looking to expand. So we started doing, a number of test fits, and they were already huge. They're a really, really large law firm. So I want to say they're probably the biggest in Denver at this point.
They said they had 70
partners. That's not counting associates, paralegals, or secretaries.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, or support staff. So you've got at least 100 people working per floor plate, and there's 3 floor plates here. So I know that there are at least 300 people working here. Right from the beginning, being a large firm, I guess there's not a lot of space in Denver. You think there's all these huge buildings and there's lots of available office space, but when you're looking from a law firm's perspective for 3 floors of contiguous space, it's a challenge. So we looked at I think I test fitted probably, I don't know, half the high rises in downtown. They only wanted to be downtown. They want to be near the courts. So they had a very small radius in terms of how many blocks they were looking at. But luckily, I was working with another law firm, Dorsey & Whitney, and Dorsey & Whitney was in this space prior to Wheeler Trigg looking into it. So they had just vacated this space, and then through, it's just pure luck, another law firm adjacent moved out, and they got 3 floors of contiguous space in the building that they wanted right from the beginning.
Wow.
So, and this is the tallest building in Denver, so it's, in terms of prestige, that means a lot to attorneys, and these guys, they have a lot of guests come to the office, and they actually go to their clients probably more than they have guests come here. But one thing they didn't have in their old space was that ability to bring clients in and be proud of the office that they're in. So that was a big factor in the design too. They wanted a space that they could be proud of, that represented Colorado well, and really made a statement about Wheeler Trigg.
We went and saw the previous spaces before we came here.
Oh, wow.
What a difference.
Yeah, night and day.
In image and feel and volume of space. Very, very different layout. And we'll get to it, but the people here just seem so thrilled.
Yeah, the building they were in, the only term I can think to describe it is cattywampus, because it was the old Quest building. It was designed primarily to be open plan floor plates for workstations, and then over time, those floors have been sold off from Quest, which is now CenturyLink, and turned into other corporations. So when you take a floor plate that was originally designed to be all open and only have partition-based workstations, and then you try to create 225, 150 square foot offices, you don't get any consistency. I think their corridor width was close to like 42 inches wide.
It was so narrow.
People were packed on top of each other. It didn't function the way that I think a law firm should function. You couldn't find your way in or out. So it was a problem.
What's the difference in square feet between their previous spaces and here? Is there quite a bit more?
I want to say they expanded close to 15%. They were pretty conservative with that. They had 2 contiguous floors in 1801, and then they had a suite in another part of the building that was on a totally different floor, and I want to say it was like 5 floors below where their current space was. When they found this space, it was half a floor plate larger than the space they were currently renting at 1801. So I gave them a little room for growth, but by the time they signed the lease and we got started with the design process, I believe that they filled all of their growth space except for 2 or 3 offices at this point. So they're going to be looking for more space, I would say probably by the end of the year.
And I was talking with one of their staff. They said they are growing quite a bit.
Yeah, they've made a lot of strategic hires since they moved to this facility, and they moved into the space, I want to say 3 weeks ago. So that was the big push, was to get everybody settled and then bring the new guys on board. So.
Well, and it's got to be appealing to new people to have a space like this as well. So there's multiple reasons that this is really advantageous to them.
Correct. Yeah.
So. Design process from start to finish. You said by the time you signed the documents to, how long was that time period?
From the time we signed the documents till now, I want to say it was over 2 years ago. We probably spent 6 to 8 months test fitting buildings in downtown before we were able to, get the lease signed. We'll know that we could get all 3 floors in this building and get the lease signed. We don't typically move into construction documentation until a lease is formally signed. But, we're as interior designers, I think we're advisors more to the real estate side than we are to the building. So, we're representing the client. We're trying to figure out what move is going to make the most sense. So we were definitely well on board before they even signed the lease with Republic Plaza.
And what you called it, test what?
Test fits.
So if you do a test fit, can you describe that process?
A test fit is when you take the program from your client. In this case, Wheeler Trigg. We had we had a number of partner offices, a number of associate offices, legal secretaries, paralegals, and support staff that we knew we had to accommodate on top of public space. So knowing what those parameters are, we construct a plan essentially based on the floor print of the available space, and then figure out how well it works. A test fit will tell us if, you can fit everybody on the floor plate, but you may have terrible views. And when you're an attorney, it's important to have every partner have a great view, regardless if it's the Rocky Mountains or the Plains. It's still important that they have that facility. So a lot weighs into it, not just the actual available square footage. It's also about what the potential of the space could be. And it's our job to kind of evaluate that and make a recommendation.
So we probably have kind of skipped over a little bit, but can you just itemize the goals that the client had for this project?
For this project, they had so many goals. We did a number of what I refer to as visioning sessions. It's essentially we sit down with all the decision makers and say, okay, if you could paint the perfect picture of your next space, what would it entail? And for this particular space, everyone wanted it to celebrate the view. They wanted to really celebrate that Colorado view, but they didn't want the space to feel like redneck Colorado, for lack of a better term. And I guess they had walked through a bunch of projects where they saw a lot of slate on the floor, lots of what I would call Colorado rough materials, and I guess nothing against that type of palette, but for these guys, they wanted a sleek, modern facility in Denver. So they didn't want their space to kind of pull all those materials in, but be more about a reflection of the views and what's on the outside. Another big thing was natural light. Their old building was really dark, so they wanted, lots of light, and they wanted all employees to have access to natural light. So we, in this space, we looked at utilizing a lot of side light glazing, clear story. There's a lot of full height glazing in spots so that we can actually harness that daylight and pull it deep into the middle of the space. Gosh, what else were some of their goals? They definitely wanted it to look professional and sophisticated. I mean, that came up over and over again.
Did they have a certain brand they were trying to communicate in some way?
They didn't. They kind of looked to us to help with that, and I think sometimes we overreach a little bit in terms of concept. Our big thing from a concept perspective was to make sure that the material was natural. And true to whatever it was. So if it was, we're going to use a lot of stone because stone, in my mind, says we're here to stay. It has a presence. So we used a lot of Carrara marble throughout the entire space. I always think of Prudential and the Rock. It's that type of feel. And you want Wheeler Trigg to feel like they're a permanent fixture in Denver.
And substantial.
And I think the best way to do that is with natural materials like stone and wood. And so we used, a lot of stone and wood. The millwork budget on this job was actually higher than my electric budget, which is unheard of. But, it was important to the client and it was important to us. So.
And it's strategically used.
Yeah.
The wood is beautiful.
Definitely. Definitely. And I think it's a big factor in retention too. You'd be surprised how far putting a little wood in an attorney's office will go, but the fact that all the offices here have wood doors with glass side lights, and then they've got paneling on the outside as well as the inside, it kind of sends this message that we are a very established firm and we only employ the best of the best, because whoever sits in this room, is not your average attorney. They're people that, have been headhunted coast to coast to come work here. So it's like, it makes a statement. So I'm trying to think what else kind of drove the process on their side. They just wanted to be the best. That's the only thing I can think to tell you. Like they were very cognizant of other firms in town. I think we toured every other firm in town with them, and then we would have download sessions after that to kind of talk about the good points and the bad points and what they would do differently. So that really helped guide the process as well, and we took them through our projects as well as a number of other interior designers in town. I think I can't stress enough that once you're an interior designer, you're not really designing for you anymore. You always have to be cognizant that everyone is going to be walking through that project. So you have to think about impressions and what other people are going to say, because it reflects, and that's your biggest word of mouth is, when it works, is great marketing. When it doesn't work, it's terrible.
And it's so fast.
Yeah, it is, and especially in Denver, it's like, this is a big city, but it's still a small town.
It is.
So
it's very connected. It's
yeah,
very networked.
You do something good and you'll hear about it quickly. You do something bad and you'll hear about it even quicker.
Right.
So
Unfortunately.
Exactly.